So if somebody who is coming in to use your services, can you walk us through maybe what that process might look like from maybe kind of a couple steps, like what stones along the way? What would that look like for me if I?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times we'll get referrals from people. We're the what's next. What do we do with this person? We've identified them as being high risk, anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, addiction. What do we do now? Like, we've identified them, they're willing to get help, we don't want to know. The traditional concept in the work environments is you go through your employee assistance program and they will give you resources. Well, what that looks like is a book of people that take your insurance, and that doesn't work when you're working with people with trauma. It's great for other aspects, but we don't have the kind of time to wait around for 2 weeks for a counselor to get in to see you, because you're coming in hot. That's what I say. And so somebody is referred to me, and a lot of times they'll just say, hey, call Jennifer, she's going to take care of it. And that's what we do. So they come to me and I do a pretty thorough intake on them. We find out, we just lay it all out. Where have you been? What have you done? What brought you to this particular point right here? And we spend a good time with them. I spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours with them, just unpacking everything, letting them unload. And then I'm not a counselor, so I don't diagnose, I don't assess anything, but I can tell where they're at in the mental health spectrum, where we need to go from there. And after that, everybody sees a nurse practitioner who specializes in behavioral health, and she used to be an ICU nurse. She saved my life, and she came on board with us from the very, very beginning. And she does a thorough blood work panel on everybody, and then she comes in and she sees them for medication management. And medication management can look like anything, and it's specific to that individual person. So
can I ask you a real quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the blood work piece, and the more and more I get into this, the chemical makeup of someone or each person is different, right? So
correct.
The blood work, what exactly is the intent for that?
So what that we look for is we look at testosterone levels. She looks at thyroid levels. If there's a pre-existing condition for thyroid levels. She looks at just normal blood counts. If there is anything that's pre-existing, we just kind of get a baseline. But really what she's looking for is the testosterone levels. And testosterone is so important when it comes to anxiety and depression. And a lot of people have the misconception that testosterone, roid rages you, or makes you want to like hump everything on the planet. And that's not necessarily true. That's completely different. And what they're looking for is steroids. That's kind of what does that, or gives them the road rage aspect. Testosterone is your God-given hormone to bring you down from fight or flight. And when you're in a traumatic event and you're in trauma situations day in and day out, you have a whole chemical slew of stuff that dumps into your system. And cortisol is one of those. And so cortisol is kind of the culprit of everything, and that puts you and sends you into fight or flight, along with a lot of other scientific stuff that you don't want to go through.
So real quick, so if you go to somewhere to get treatment, PTSD treatment, and without a good metabolic workup or good blood workup, they automatically start giving you medication.
Correct.
Would that be a sign of a bad route to take?
In my personal experience, yes, because that's kind of what happened to me, and that's why we designed this program. Is when you go to your normal PCP, who is fantastic at very everyday situations, they're great at that. They do not specialize in mental health, nor should they. And so I always tell people, you would not go to a primary care doctor for a heart issue. You would see them first, and then they would recommend you go to somebody that specializes in that. And so that's what our key people do, is they specialize in mental health and mental health medication, specifically dealing with the first responders and military, because you're a little different. You guys' personalities are a little bit.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, so
Perfectly normal.
textbook medications are when you go to like your primary care doctor, they're going to just, well, you're developing like depression symptoms. Well, no shit, I'm developing depression symptoms. I've just pulled 6 babies out of a car, and it's different. They don't understand that world by no fault of their own. They just don't. And so when we look at the person as a whole, we first and foremost, we stay away from some of that just textbook, I just sit in the corner and take notes. That's all I do. The smart people are the ones that do everything. But the nurse practitioners will assess each individual person instead of just doing textbook medication right at them, which that's just not how you treat somebody that's going through with trauma and PTSD. The blood work, though, is so important with the testosterone levels, and we don't necessarily test cortisol levels because studies show that if cortisol levels are high, testosterone levels are low. And going back to that, testosterone is what brings you down from fight or flight normally. And as you're in traumatic events over and over and over again, your cortisol levels rise and your testosterone is just not there. It depletes so quick, you can't bring it back down. And so you're riding high and you're flipping shit over people leaving clothes in the dryer. And our guys, we don't know the difference between, your body just doesn't know the difference between stressors. And that's why that's so important. So before we throw any medication at you, which is a needed triage for this event, we always test, like, maybe your thyroid's off, maybe your testosterone's down, maybe, you've got, I don't know, whatever they're looking at. That's where we start. So that's the first step. That's a long-winded explanation of where we go. So we see that. We also have another nurse practitioner that deals with a little bit more, if your anxiety is so high and we're dealing into a little bit more of the mood stabilizers or somewhere along those lines, we go see her as well, just to regulate those medications. And so there's 2 people that are constantly regulating those medications, and I'm with them during both of those appointments, because most people, when they get into these doctors, they talk faster than I do, and they just kind of glaze over. They don't remember what they're supposed to take, why they're taking it. It's going to make them feel funny, but that's kind of what we want a little bit, not to change their mood or not to change their personality anyway, but that's why I'm over there taking notes going, yes, it's supposed to happen. It's supposed to happen. So that's the first step. The second step is then I direct them to one of our trauma counselors, which I kind of determine who's got the best fit based on their personalities. Because the worst thing on the planet is for you guys to go into a counselor and start vomiting all of your trauma, and the counselor sitting on the other side of you crying. We've lost you right there. And it's horrible what comes out of your mouth, and not to downplay that at all, but you have to have somebody that you're not going to send into PTSD. And if you get some Joe Schmo off of the streets, it's like, yeah, come on in. I totally deal with military and first responder. They are blown away by what comes out of your mouth, and it does no good. It does no good. So my team is very culturally competent in that. So that's the second step, and we require them to go to counseling once a week. We require them to see one of their nurse practitioners once a week. They check in with me 2 to 3 times a week. I'm the pain in the ass of the whole relationship, just to make sure that they're continuing on in their treatment plan. We also rebuild their resiliency, because that's huge. You guys forget that there's life outside of wherever it is that you're doing. And we make them do those things. We push them and rebuild them back into a quote unquote normal world.
Well, it's that mental strength you got to build back up to, right?
Yes.
And that's
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and we have a group aspect that goes along with that as well, which everybody fights us on group. I don't want to go to group. I don't like talking in group. But it is a group led by our peer support team, and it is amazing to watch that. I have nothing to do with that aspect. My peer support team leads that. And it's not traditional group counseling where you're just like, oh, let me tell you about my feelings. Sometimes they walk in and they've had a horrific night and they just unpack that, and that's healing for them. And so all of that is dictated and monitored for at least 8 weeks. And it's just helping them and moving them forward because it works. I mean, it works. And the accountability aspect is huge, just to know that there's people out there that will help you and understand what you're going through.